I heard my own son say, "She's old, lonely, and sitting on a pile of money. Just milk her like a cow until she's dry." And the worst part? He thought he'd already hung up. Those words hit me harder than I'd like to admit. It felt like being slapped by someone you never thought would lay a hand on you. I was just standing at the sink. My tea had gone cold on the counter. The house around me was quiet, humming like it always did. The phone was still there on the table, face up. I hadn't touched it since Brian called earlier, asking about a tax form I'd left in his car. He'd said, "Thanks, Mom. Talk soon." Warm, polite, smooth, but he hadn't ended the call, and I wasn't fast enough to hang up either, so I heard everything. "She won't live forever," he said. "We don't even have to push. Just nudge her a little. She'll hand over everything." Then I heard Leslie's voice, sharp, casual. "She's practically begging for it, always so grateful when we show up." Grateful. That's what she thought I felt. When they'd breeze in with bakery boxes and those practice smiles, when they brought the kids who barely looked up from their phones, when they pretended to care about the garden I kept alive just for their visits. It was a Sunday in April. The azaleas were in full bloom, thick and pink, the kind Andy used to say made the house look like it was dressed up for church. I'd set the table with the good plates, made ham, eggs, and those muffins Emma used to love. She barely touched them. Kyle joked about downsizing. Emma laughed. "We could totally Airbnb this place." Brian chuckled, "Let's not kill Grandma off just yet." And I laughed too, or tried to. Now the house just felt colder. Not like the temperature, just something in the air, in the walls, like even they had heard what I was never supposed to. I finally reached for the phone and ended the call myself. Then I just stood there, hands on the counter, watching my tea grow cold. Same mug Andy used to use. Faded blue, chipped at the rim. I didn't cry, didn't scream. I cleaned the dishes, wiped down the counter, just like always. The motions were automatic, but something inside me had shifted. I used to tell Andy, "At least we raised a kind boy." I clung to that like some people cling to faith. But that morning, I realized I'd been wrong for a long time, and maybe, deep down, I'd known it. I just didn't want to face it. Outside, the wind stirred the garden. Inside, the house stood still. I sat out on the porch until the light changed, watched the afternoon shadows stretch long and quiet across the yard, like regrets. "They think I'm weak just because I'm quiet," I whispered. "They forgot who built this house." And for the first time in years, I opened the hallway drawer, the one with all the financial papers, the one I always said I'd organize someday. That day had come. Morning light poured through the lace curtains, casting soft patterns across the wooden kitchen floor, same floor I used to scrub on my knees while Brian played with his toy trucks in the corner. Back when "mommy" meant safe, back when he looked at me like I mattered. I tied on my gardening apron and stepped out into the backyard. The roses were blooming, fat, fragrant, deep red. Andy and I planted them together 23 years ago. I used to think they'd outlive us both, but this year they looked tired, heads heavy, petals drooping, like even they knew something wasn't right. As I watered them, the hose trembled in my hands, not because of the pressure, because of me. His voice kept echoing in my mind. "Mom's too fragile to deal with any of this. We'll just smile, milk it for what it's worth. Milk it, like I was some cow." I gripped the hose until my knuckles turned white. Then I turned it off. The cicadas were loud today. Nature never asks permission to be loud, unlike me. A thorn brushed across the back of my hand. At least that's what I told myself. It stung, not deep, just sharp enough to make me flinch. I stared at the scratch, a thin red line, one of many I've learned to ignore over the years. Back inside, I pulled the old photo album from the shelf. The leather cover was worn, corners bent from years of turning pages. I flipped to the one where Andy's holding baby Brian, looking like he's got the whole world in his arms. I hovered my fingers over the photo. I could still remember the smell of the hospital, the feel of those tiny baby socks, the sound of Andy's proud, deep laugh. That little boy, he was so loved, still is. So how could he? The phone rang. It was Diane. I thought about letting it go to voicemail, but she'd just call again. Hey, I said, steadying my voice. Oh, good. You sound okay. Just checking in. You seemed a little off last time. I'm fine, I lied, shutting the album. Just tired. Garden's a mess. You sure? Want me to come down next week? No, I'm all right. I forced a little laugh. Thanks, though. After we hung up, I stared at the blank screen. Then it lit up again. Brian, hey, Mom, all good? Just like that, like nothing had happened. I didn't respond. A minute later, Leslie sent a photo of the kids in matching swimsuits by the pool. I tried to smile. I really did. Held the phone to my chest and whispered, "They're beautiful." Then I deleted it. I stood by the kitchen window. Didn't really see anything. The cicadas buzzed outside, and that hum, it was in my chest too. Quietly, without meaning to, I said it out loud. You lied to my face, and I let you. Something shifted in me. I walked to the hallway cabinet, knelt down, opened the drawer with all the financial documents, the ones Andy always handled. I pulled out a folder, and for the first time, I wasn't skimming. I was reading. I used to think love meant being patient, but maybe love means knowing where to draw the line too. If I died tomorrow, they'd probably show up at the bank before they made it to my funeral. The house was still, diamond soys, cool. My slippers barely made a sound on the wooden floor. The silence felt thick, like it wrapped around me. This had been Andy's house too, but today, it felt like it belonged to memory more than it belonged to me. I moved slowly, like the furniture might be listening, like the walls might speak if I disturbed them. I brought a lukewarm cup of tea to the dining table and laid out a stack of bank statements from the safe. All those pages, filled with numbers, codes, none of it I'd ever really cared to learn. Andy used to say, "Don't worry, Mags, I've got it handled." But just in case. Those words echoed in my head like a knock on a door I never wanted to open. I started flipping through. Brian's name was on more of it than I expected. He was a secondary contact on the checking account, had a key to the house, still co-signed on the car I barely drive anymore, and the life insurance, that went back to when he was 19 after his first accident. I never changed it. What Mom thinks she'll ever need to? I opened the drawer with the property deed. Andy had made sure both our names were on everything. Proof, he told me once on our anniversary. Not just trust. Trust is a feeling. Proof is insurance. I had trusted, maybe too much. The light outside was changing. The early summer sun slipped through the blinds in long golden stripes. I sat still and watched the dust floating in the air. My heart wasn't racing. My hands didn't shake, but I wasn't numb anymore. I reached into the bottom of the safe again and pulled out a thick envelope, edges a little yellow with time, Andy's handwriting, no mistaking it. To Margaret, 40 years of us. I didn't open it, not yet. Instead, I got up and walked through the house, checked every single lock. Front door, back door, basement hatch. And for the first time in 5 years, I changed the alarm code. Picked something only I would know, a number no one else could guess. It felt like I was covering something precious with a quilt. Or maybe it felt like I was finally pulling the quilt off and looking at what had been hiding underneath. After dinner, I sat down with a yellow notepad. At the top, I wrote in bold, steady letters, "Who I can trust." I stared at it for a while, then wrote just one name, Diane. That was enough. I didn't need a whole list. I just needed a place to begin. I picked up the phone and dialed. She answered on the second ring. "Hey," Diane said, gentle. How are you holding up? I need you to come over, I said, quiet but clear. There was a pause. Margaret, what's going on? I need you to bring a pen, I said. Another pause, then a breath. All right, she said. When? Tomorrow, before lunch. She didn't ask anything else. She didn't have to. I hung up and looked down at that yellow page again. One name. That's all I needed. Outside, the wind stirred the chimes on the porch, soft like the house had finally exhaled, and for the first time in weeks, I felt awake. Diane showed up the next morning. She didn't ask questions, didn't pry. She just walked in like she always did, like family should. A folder in one hand, a pen in the other. Turns out, I muttered as I poured the coffee, love isn't blind, it just wears reading glasses it never bothers to use. She gave me that look, eyebrows raised, half smile, didn't say a word. We sat at the dining table, sunlight spilling over stacks of papers and sealed envelopes. Outside, the birds chirped like it was any other summer morning in Richmond, but inside, the air felt thick, heavier than the humidity. Andy used to say, people show you who they are when they think you're not looking. The truth is, I'd been looking. I just didn't want to see. Diane started going through my statements, one page at a time, like she was solving a puzzle. Brian's name is everywhere, she said, tapping one of the papers. Here, co-beneficiary. There, joint access. You've basically left the doors unlocked. I shrugged. He's my son. Margaret, she said softly, I know. But being your son doesn't mean he's earned your silence. And just like that, my stomach twisted. Because she was right. Every red flag she pointed out was something Andy and I had put in place years ago. Back when we believed trust was enough. Back when betrayal felt like something that only happened in books. I could call Tina, Diane offered. She does estate law, smart, quiet, no drama. No. The word came out too fast, too sharp. I looked down at my coffee. I'm not ready for that. She didn't push. Instead, she reached for the envelope I'd left sitting on the table, the one with Andy's handwriting on it, the one I hadn't dared to open. I found it in the safe, I told her. Our 40th anniversary. She looked at me, then slowly opened it. The paper inside was thick, a little curled around the edges. Andy's handwriting still looked the same, familiar, steady. If one day you feel alone in a full house, walk out proud. I didn't cry, didn't gasp. I just looked at Diane and she looked back at me like she already knew what was coming. I need a lawyer, I whispered. She nodded, like she'd been waiting for me to say those words since the minute she walked in. We sat in silence for a while, coffee going cold. Outside, I could hear kids laughing down the block, their voices floating through the fences like echoes from a simpler time. I picked up the phone and dialed. It rang once, twice. A woman answered. Hello, this is Tina James. I took a breath I didn't even know I was holding. Hi, Tina. I think I've made a mistake, and I want to undo it. Her voice softened right away. You're not the first to say that. Let's talk. After I hung up, I looked back down at Andy's letter. Alone in a full house. He always knew how to say the things I never let myself admit. And now, I was finally ready to listen. Tina didn't waste any time, and neither did I. Because honestly, I'd already wasted years. No one teaches you how to protect yourself from your own children. They show you how to change diapers, pack school lunches, cheer from the bleachers. But they don't tell you what to do when the child you raise starts talking about you like you're a problem to be solved. The law office was small but warm. Framed diplomas lined the walls, along with family photos. A lavender candle flickered on the windowsill. Outside, Richmond was baking under the summer sun. Inside, the air conditioning hummed like a soft lullaby. Tina Morales greeted me with a kind smile and a firm handshake. When we sat down, she looked me right in the eye. No pity, no judgment. I've seen this before, she said, flipping through my paperwork. Family is where betrayal wears its nicest shoes. That line dropped into my chest like a stone in still water. We got to work. She walked me through it, removing Brian as co-beneficiary, changing access rights, updating the will. I nodded along, even as my hands trembled while I signed. "You sure you don't want me to handle the banks for you?" she asked gently. I looked at her. Number, I need to do this myself. I needed to feel the pen in my hand. I needed to be the one to walk up to that counter and say, "Take his name off." There's something sacred about taking back your own voice. Halfway through the paperwork, my phone buzzed. Voicemail from Brian. "Hey, Mom, just checking in. Are you mad at me or something? Let me know, okay?" His voice was warm, almost kind, almost believable. I stared at the screen for a few seconds, then hit delete. Tina didn't say a word. By the time we finished, the sun had started dipping low, casting long shadows across the floor. I felt tired, but not broken. It was like pulling weeds from a garden. You get scratched, you sweat, but you do it, because if you don't, the roots will choke out the roses. That evening, I stood at my front door with a new set of keys in my hand. I had changed the locks. Only 2 keys were left on the ring, mine and Diane's. I looked down at them sitting in my palm. Not heavy, not light either, just honest, just real. Then I grabbed a notepad from the kitchen drawer and wrote in bold, steady strokes, "Do not enter without permission." I taped it to the inside of the glass panel on the front door, right at eye level. It wasn't a threat. It was a boundary, something I hadn't drawn in a very long time. That night, the breeze carried the scent of jasmine through the screen as I sat on the porch. I sipped chamomile tea, listened to the trees swaying in the dark. Inside, the house was still quiet, still mine, but no longer voiceless. Taking back control doesn't feel brave when you're in it. It feels lonely, like sitting across from the child you once sang lullabies to and realizing you have to lock the door behind them now. But even love that's been blind can learn to see, and seeing clearly, finally, was worth the ache. For a while, everything was quiet, too quiet, the kind of quiet that doesn't rest. It just hums, waits. I was sitting in the living room, holding a warm cup of Earl Grey in my hands. Afternoon light slid through the thin curtains like it didn't want to disturb anything. Bills were scattered across the coffee table. Nothing urgent, nothing heavy, just part of the routine. Me paying my own way. You know, when people realize the well's starting to run dry, that's when they show up with buckets. My phone buzzed. It was Brian. I hadn't heard from him in a week. I stared at the screen for a second before picking up. His voice came through smooth, almost too warm. "Hey, Mom, just checking in. You doing okay? Diane said you've been kinda busy." I kept it simple. "I'm fine." He paused. "Oh, good. Good, listen, I've been thinking we should get together soon. I miss your cooking." That tone. Like nothing had happened. Like the ground hadn't shifted beneath my feet. I said something vague, polite. We said goodbye. I hit the red button and set the phone face down on the table. And then, voices. "She's getting suspicious," Brian said. His tone had changed. No warmth, just steel. I blinked. The call hadn't ended. The line was still open. Then Leslie's voice came through, light and sharp. "Then push her. Ask for the house this time. She's just sitting on it." "Yeah," Brian said. "She's old. She'll cave. Just milk her like a cow." The room didn't shift. The air didn't get heavy. The sun still shone through the curtains. But something in me shifted. I didn't say a word. Didn't reach for the phone. Just sat there and let their words hang in the air, like smoke from a slow-burning fire. There it was. Not hinted, not misunderstood, just the truth. Brian's voice dropped lower. "If she gets that lawyer involved again, it might get messy. I just want this done before the end of the year." Leslie laughed. "She doesn't even need all that space." They kept going, talking about insurance, assets, timelines, like I was some seasonal crop, like I'd been planted just to harvest. Still, I didn't cry, didn't flinch. I listened until their voices faded. Then I pressed end. Silence again. Somewhere down the street, a lawnmower buzzed. Inside, the mantel clock ticked like always. But I wasn't the same woman who had sat down with her tea an hour ago. I stood, walked over to the drawer by the sideboard, pulled out a pen, a thick one, the kind that doesn't shake in your hand, grabbed a legal pad and wrote in big, steady letters, "No more access." 3 words, plain, final. I tore the page off and pinned it to the bulletin board above the kitchen desk. No need to explain it, no need to cry over it. They'd shown me exactly who they were, and I was done pretending I hadn't seen it. I poured out what was left of my tea, rinsed the cup in the sink. The faucet ran clear, cold, honest, and for the first time in a long, long time, so did I. If any part of that sounds familiar, I just want you to know you're not alone. Sometimes the people we love most are the ones who hurt us the quietest. Have you ever overheard something you weren't meant to, and it changed everything? Tell me in the comments. I'll be reading them tonight with a cup of tea in hand. And if this story speaks to you, stick around. There's more to come, because it's about time someone like us had her voice heard. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss what happens next, because the next chapter, that's when I stop surviving and start choosing. That night, I didn't sleep, but I did make a list. Nothing dramatic, just a lined sheet from the legal pad I kept near the phone. At the top, I wrote, "What's still mine?" I raised him with everything I had, and now I'd spend whatever was left making sure he could never use me again. The house was quiet and dim, but it didn't feel heavy anymore. It felt like a courtroom after the verdict, empty, settled. The curtains stayed closed, the doors stayed locked. Fall came early that year, or maybe it was just colder inside me now. I called Tina the next morning. We sat in her office again, surrounded by thick books and the quiet hum of a printer. She didn't ask how I was. She just opened the folder and said, "Let's finish it." We did. We removed Brian's name from every account, updated the insurance, revoked every power of attorney form, no loopholes, no just in case left behind. Then I handed her a typed letter I'd written the night before. She read it, nodded once. "This is clear. I'll send it certified." It said, "All financial communication regarding my estate is to go through my attorney from this point forward. Do not contact me directly." Short, sharp, final. Brian must have received it around noon. By 1 o'clock, the texts started rolling in. Polite at first, then confused, then angry. I didn't read most of them, but the voicemail, I saved that one. His voice cracked. "You're being dramatic, Mom. This is ridiculous. We're family. What are you doing?" I didn't respond, didn't even flinch. Instead, I made tea. That evening, Diane called. "You okay?" she asked, soft and careful. I looked out the window at the backyard. The leaves were turning brown at the edges. I could smell fall in the air. "Yes," I said, for the first time in years. The next day I stood at the bank counter, both hands resting steady on the desk. The young woman behind the glass smiled gently. "Okay, Miss Whitmore," she said, handing me a clean envelope. "All updated. Brian's name is no longer listed, and we've added Diane as your emergency contact, just like you asked." I thanked her, took the envelope, walked slowly to the exit. Outside, the sunlight was crisp, honest, no shadows I couldn't face. At the edge of the sidewalk, there was a trash can. I stopped, reached into my purse, pulled out the old key ring, the one with the silver house key, the one Brian had copied years ago without asking. I dropped it in. It landed with a soft clink. No ceremony, no regret. Paperwork isn't just ink and forms. It's protection. It's proof that love, real love, shouldn't leave you broke, not in your heart and not in your pocket. Back at home, I opened the windows. let the breeze in. Freedom doesn't always show up with fireworks. Sometimes it slips in quietly on the other side of a locked door and a brand new beginning. After that, there was silence. Not peace, just silence. The kind that sits heavy on your chest. Still, unmoving, unapologetic. They didn't want me. They wanted what I had. I stood in the hallway, staring at the linen closet. The door hung open like it had something to confess. Stacks of blankets, old towels, mismatched pillowcases. Some of them hadn't seen daylight since Andy was alive. A breeze slipped in through a cracked window, brushed against my arms, like it was gently nudging me forward. I pulled out the first stack and started folding, not to tidy up, but to let go. At the very back of the closet, I found a shoebox labeled Brian, age 6. Inside, crayon drawings, a paper crown, a Mother's Day card that read, "You're the bestest mom ever." I held it for a moment, then set it aside, not in the trash, not to burn, just away. Later that week, Diane came over with takeout and her laptop. "No drama," she said, typing fast. "I'll list it private. No photos, no open house, just enough to get feelers out." I nodded. "Quiet is good." We worked at the dining table. The chandelier above us still had that one flickering bulb I never got around to fixing. Outside, the maple trees had started to thin. Leaves floated down like time loosening its grip. That night, Emma texted me, "Hey, Grandma, is Thanksgiving still at your place? Leslie wants to do potluck again, LOL." I looked at the screen, then set the phone down. I didn't reply. The next morning, I dragged 3 boxes to the curb. Kitchen gadgets I never used, books I never liked, clothes that didn't fit who I was anymore. Let the world take what it wants. I was done holding on. Across the street, Miro was raking leaves. He gave me a wave. "You pruning?" he called with that crooked smile of his. I smiled back. "More like uprooting." He didn't say anything else. That's what I liked about Miro. He knew how to let silence breathe. By the end of the week, I'd gone through every room, cleared shelves, labeled boxes, left only what mattered. Now when I walked through the house, it echoed. And echoes don't lie. In the den, I found the photo album from our Montana trip, 1994. The one where Andy's got his arm wrapped around me, both of us sunburned and laughing. I flipped through it slow, then boxed it up and wrote "Keep" on the side in thick black ink. On Saturday, I mailed the last of the paperwork to the real estate agent. It didn't feel like selling a house. It felt like rewriting a chapter I never meant to leave unfinished. I double-checked every page. My name was the only one on every single line. Just me. At dusk, I made a cup of tea and sat on the front porch. The swing creaked softly under me as I shifted. The air smelled like dry leaves and wood smoke. The sky was turning a deep, bruised blue. Above me, the porch light flickered once, then twice, then went dark. I didn't get up. I just whispered, to no one in particular, "Good." I thought I'd feel grief, but what I felt was air, like I'd been holding my breath for decades. And finally, quietly, I let it go. They raised their voices when I set a boundary, because they thought they owned me. Mid-November came fast. The trees in Richmond were bare, the wind sharp and impatient. I'd moved into a small rented apartment on the east side of town, right past a diner with a flickering neon sign and a park where I sometimes walk in the mornings. The place was modest, 1 bedroom, tiny kitchen, but it smelled like fresh paint and possibility. The floor creaked with honesty, no big announcements, no farewell dinners. I just left. No one showed up to say goodbye, but then again, I never told them I was going. The first morning I woke up in the new place, my phone buzzed 3 times. Voicemail from Brian. "Are you serious? Selling the house without telling us? You know how that looks?" Then a text from Leslie. "Some people forget who raised them. Pathetic." I stared at the screen. Fingers hovered for a second. Emma had posted a selfie, frowning, captioned, "Thanksgiving, ruined. Ugh, thanks, Grandma." I turned off my notifications. Let them talk. Later that week, Miro knocked on the door. He had a box labeled kitchen or fragile and a small bag of cookies. Don't worry, he smiled. Store-bought, I'm no baker. I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. I'm grateful for anything that isn't packed in tape. We carried the last of the boxes up the stairs. He looked around the space, took it in. Cozy, he said, placing the box gently on the counter. It's not much, I said, wiping my hands on my pants. But it's mine. All of it. He nodded. That counts for something. We made tea and sat on the little balcony wrapped in scarves and old blankets. He told me he spent last Thanksgiving alone with a good book and leftover lasagna. I told him that actually sounded perfect. After he left, I unpacked slowly, one cabinet, one drawer, one corner at a time. I wasn't in a rush. I wasn't trying to force this place to feel like home, because truth is, it already felt more like home than the big house had in years. I placed Andy's teapot on the stove, only one chipped mug next to it. I liked it that way. From a shallow drawer, I pulled out a half-used notebook, wrote in the margin, "Freedom is quiet. That's why they mistake it for loneliness." I took my tea to the window, watched the wind move down the alley. No voices, no tension humming behind closed doors, just the soft hum of the fridge, the clink of a spoon in my cup, the quiet thrum of my own heartbeat, present, steady, and then I did something I hadn't done in months. I smiled. Not the kind you wear like armor, a real one, small, honest, enough. I picked up my phone and texted Diane, "Come over next week. Let's have our own Thanksgiving." And that was that. Sometimes I wonder, have you ever walked away from a place or a person and felt more like yourself than you had in years? If you have, or even if you're still figuring it out, I'd love to hear how you knew it was time. Leave me a note in the comments if you feel like sharing, and stay with me, because what came next wasn't quite peace, not yet, but it was something close. I didn't have a turkey this year, but I had pie, and quiet, and people who actually saw me. The apartment smelled like rosemary and lemon. The little table I borrowed from Diane was covered with a mismatched cloth I found at a thrift store. Jazz played softly from my old radio. Andy used to call it elevator music, but I liked how it didn't ask much of me, just like today. Diane showed up right on time, foil-covered dish in one arm, sass in the other. "Cornbread stuffing," she announced, setting it down with flair. And a reminder that just because we're eating like pilgrims doesn't mean we have to act like them. We laughed harder than the joke deserved, but it felt good just to laugh. I had made cranberry chicken, my quiet rebellion after 30 years of dry turkey and forced smiles. It was simple, tangy, warm. The oven cooperated, so did my nerves. Halfway through setting the table, there was a knock. It was Miro, my neighbor, holding a store-bought pumpkin pie and a bottle of red wine. His coat still smelled like the cold outside. "I know I wasn't invited," he said, a little sheepish, "but Diane said you'd forgive me." I turned to see Diane grin and shrug. "I figured we could use a little more than cranberry chicken and sister sarcasm." So we made room. Miro handed me the pie like it was something precious. And for a second, the apartment felt twice as big. We ate slowly. No rush. The kind of meal where nobody checks their phone, nobody says we need to talk, nobody brings up what's expected of who. Diane told stories about the time I accidentally turned all of Andy's socks pink. Miro shared his grandma's secret to flaky pie crust. And me? I just sat there, warm, federal, seen. No one asked about the house, or the bank accounts, or where Brian and Leslie were. At one point, I looked across the table, at my sister and a man who'd once been just a neighbor, and I felt fuller than at any Thanksgiving table I'd ever set. "I'm not just surviving anymore," I said soft. Diane smiled, didn't say a word. Miro just poured more wine. After dinner, we stacked plates in the sink. The water ran warm as we passed dishes back and forth. Miro lingered at the drying rack, drying a plate that didn't really need it. He looked over, quiet. "We should do this again," he said, not quite meeting my eyes. "Maybe Christmas?" I didn't answer right away. Not because I didn't want to, but because, for the first time in a long time, I knew I had the right to say yes, and mean it. Winter came early. Frost touched the windows before December even had a chance to settle in. I started reaching for thicker socks and that peppermint tea I used to save for guests. Only now, I drink it for me. I used to tiptoe through my own house, afraid to upset the people I loved. Now, I dance while I wait for the kettle to boil. My mornings have a rhythm now. I journal with soft music playing in the background. Nothing fancy, just the scratch of a pen and the quiet hum of being alone. I've rearranged the furniture 3 times, and not once has anyone rolled their eyes or asked, "Why bother?" It's funny. Things that used to feel indulgent now feel necessary. Lighting a candle before bed, wearing lipstick, even if I'm just reading a book, sticking a note on the bathroom mirror that says, "Still here, still worthy." I called Diane last week just to tell her I mailed her a scarf I found downtown. She cried on the phone, then accused me of making her sentimental. We laughed so hard I nearly dropped the phone in the sink. Miro still comes by sometimes, always casual, always kind. We walk the neighborhood in thick coats, not always talking, just sharing air. He brings books he thinks I'll like and leaves them without expecting anything. I make him soup and send him home with leftovers in old yogurt containers. We don't define it, and that's okay. A letter showed up 2 days ago. The handwriting was unmistakable, Brian's. But this time my stomach didn't drop, my hands didn't shake. Inside was a folded page with a quick note at the top. "You misunderstood. Things got complicated." I read the first line, then I stopped. There was a time I would have obsessed over every word, wondered what I'd done wrong, but not anymore. I walked outside with the letter, struck a match, watched it curl into nothing on the edge of the porch. Snow had started to fall, light, aimless, like ash, and I didn't feel cold. That afternoon, I drove to the cemetery. The wind had picked up, rustling the bare trees like they were whispering something to each other. I stood in front of Andy's headstone with a single magnolia bloom in hand, the last one from that stubborn little tree behind the apartment building. It bloomed out of season. Figures. I tucked it gently against the stone. "I'm okay now," I said out loud. My breath floated into the air. "You'd be proud." And somehow, saying it didn't break me. It freed me. That night, I unpacked a tiny Christmas tree I picked up from the grocery store. First one I've had since Andy passed. It didn't take up much room, just enough to sit quietly in the corner and glow like a soft promise. I don't have boxes of ornaments anymore, just one. Found it while I was clearing out the old house. A little silver cowbell, a joke from a long ago vacation with Brian when he was still just a boy. I hung it right in the center. It jingled softly as I stepped back, and I laughed, really laughed. Christmas morning was quiet, and exactly how I wanted it. The apartment smelled like cinnamon and baked apples, just a small nod to tradition. I didn't cook a full meal, just enough to feel warm. No table to set, no presents under the tree, just me, a cozy blanket, and the soft crackle of the electric fireplace in the corner. If you had told me last year that I'd spend Christmas without my son and feel relief, I wouldn't have believed you. But peace has a way of reshaping the truth. It doesn't scream, it doesn't fight, it just shows up, quietly, and settles into the corners. Miro came by around 9, holding a little paper bag from the bakery down the street. "Still warm," he said, lifting the scones like they were sacred. We sat on the couch with our plates balanced on our knees, coffee steaming between us. He didn't ask about Brian or Leslie, and that silence, that was the gift. Later in the morning, Diane called from her cabin upstate. I could hear the fireplace crackling behind her and a radio playing old Christmas carols. "You sound like yourself again," she said, after we talked about everything and nothing. "I think I might be," I said, my eyes drifting toward the shelf where I'd framed Andy's old letter. His handwriting, still steady. "If one day you feel alone in a full house, walk out proud." That frame carried weight, not just wood and glass, but permission. Not long after my phone buzzed, text from an unknown number. I almost didn't check it, but curiosity got the better of me. It was Emma. "Grandma, I'm sorry for everything. I miss you." No emoji, no excuses, just that. I stared at it. Fingers hovered. Then I set the phone down. Some healing takes time, and some things don't need an answer right away. I stood by the window, watching the snow fall in soft spirals. Just a dusting, but enough to make the world look new again. Mira was still on the couch, sipping his coffee, eyes half focused on a crossword. I turned to him, quiet, steady. "Let's take a walk," I said. "I want to show you my favorite bench." He smiled, reached for his coat. No questions asked. We stepped out into the cold. The path through the park was mostly untouched. Just a few dog prints, a faint bike track. Snow crunched under our boots like soft whispers. We walked slow. No destination except the one I chose. The bench sat under a bare oak tree. I'd spent so many mornings there in the fall thinking I was alone. But today, I didn't feel alone at all. And I didn't look back, not out of anger, not even sadness, but because, for the first time in a long time, I finally had somewhere else to go. I didn't walk away from my family because I stopped loving them. I walked away because I finally started loving myself enough to stop being used. We're often taught that endurance is love, that giving endlessly is what a mother does, but real love has boundaries. And the moment we find the courage to draw those lines, that's when we begin to breathe again, not just survive. If you've ever felt like you gave more than you had to people who only showed up with open hands, know this: you are not alone. Peace doesn't always look like reconciliation. Sometimes it looks like a quiet Christmas morning and a brand new beginning. If this story made you feel seen, I'd love to hear from you. Drop a comment. Have you ever chosen peace over obligation? And if you're ready for the next chapter in this journey, I hope you'll stay with me. The next story is one I carried in my heart for far too long. My daughter-in-law screamed, "Why don't you just disappear?" So I did, and finally lived. I can't wait to share it with you.